We are live and we are ready to get into some drafts. We are ready to have some conversation around elite tight end, and I am joined by Blair Andrews. My name is Colm Kelly. I am looking forward to this draft. Myself and Blair, sometimes when I draft with people, I'm wondering, what people's strategies are. Where are they liking to, push it? Are they looking for those early running backs? Generally, when I draft with Blair, none of those things come into my concern because we tend to push the limits a little bit in terms of the zero RB builds. And we just finished up as a teaser. We just finished up recording a RotoViz overtime episode that will come out on Friday. We talked about double elite tight end, the benefits of it, and how to put together the perfect roster so you don't do it wrong and don't make mistakes while setting up those rosters. So we will recap that a little bit as we get ready to start off here. But Blair, I'm looking forward to the show. I spent a little bit of time before we started our previous recording. I'm going to be a best man at my brother's wedding next Saturday. So I kicked off preparations on the best man speech over the last, I would say 60 minutes or so. So we're getting under work on that, but I'm looking forward. I think it'll be more fun to draft this team than to work on speech. I think that's the way I'm playing it out. But how are you feeling as we're getting ready to draft? We were debating if we were going to do a fast puppy draft, or if we're going to do a BBM draft. We'll decide on that over the next couple of minutes here. But how are you feeling as we get ready to kick off this draft?
I'm feeling good. Yeah, I'm confident we can make this draft more fun than working on a best man speech. Yeah, do what we can. I think I haven't done a fast puppy with the 20-second clock live on stream yet, so that could be an interesting sort of challenge.
And I have one in the books. I did one with Sean. So we got the 108, I believe it was in that. So if we get maybe that, it gives you still that little bit of time to work over and back. That would be nice. When you get those turn picks, it can be a little bit tricky. They're the picks I try and see if you can avoid on stream. But when we're down to 20 seconds, we better be on our toes to get those picks in. But talking elite tight end, to give some context for the show that will come out on Friday, we were talking about Blair's article that was up on rotoviz.com, looking at double elite tight end, and for the purposes of elite tight end in that conversation, we talked down as far as George Kittle. Brock Bowers, I think, is the player that we sometimes allow ourselves to get to as an asterisk beside that conversation. But we talked a lot about how to do it, and I guess the key part looking into it is basically your detours, as we like to call them in that situation, from a zero RB build are for the tight ends. They are for your elite tight ends, and you need to be getting as many wide receivers in that range as you can to balance out, I guess, the opportunity cost for the tight end position. But when we look at it, and we did reference Michael Dubner's work while doing that show, having 5 wide receivers in these formats through the opening 7 rounds. Obviously, if you take 2 tight ends in those opening 7 rounds, you need to use the other 5 rounds on receiver picks. So you're passing up the elite quarterbacks generally in it, those top tier running backs, and then you're also passing up the dead zone, which I think in most cases is the right thing to do anyway at the running back position. The other thing that I think that we should highlight, Blair, as we talk about it a little bit, is the cost of tight end in 2024 versus other years. And that we referenced, Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews in previous seasons, and where the cost to draft them was, mid first round, late first round, into the second round, for example. And this year with Sam Laporta going as the last pick of the third round and then dropping down from there. So I think we have a more condensed group in terms of the elite tight ends, but I think they're actually at a cheaper cost, and basically they're in that running back dead zone, which allows you to buy in and get those players on your roster. What are your general thoughts? I've gone on a kind of a soliloquy there. What are your thoughts on what we should talk about?
No, it's all good. Yeah, I completely agree that, this season sets up to do a double elite tight end build, certainly a single elite tight end build, better than most, just because of the prices you're able to get on a lot of those early tight ends, with Laporta going at, often falling into the 4th round even. So if you can grab the top tight end by ADP in the 4th round and still get those 3 elite receivers, or even an elite running back in one of those first 3 rounds, then I think you're set up pretty well for success.
We obviously talked about the double elite approach, and that is what the article highlights. And I do have it linked in today's show notes. But when we look at the elite tight end, I guess, in general. Is there any drafts that you're leaving without one of those kind of top end tight ends down as far as George Kittle, or are you getting at least one of those in every single draft? So we're obviously talking about getting 2 of them, but is there any of them where you're walking away without at least one of them?
Very rarely am I leaving a draft without anyone, without any one of those first kind of 9 guys. I think the player that I would be the only player I don't want to go past Brock Bowers basically to get my tight end 1. And even that kind of feels thin because after Bowers is off the board, you're looking at only a handful of names who I think have that same kind of upside. So yeah, I'm definitely want to get at least one of these elite guys in every one of my drafts.
And I think the other part of it that we mentioned, just to highlight it again, is when we're talking about like people potentially doing this process wrong. The other part was you're passing on those elite quarterbacks. So then when you get to the window quarterbacks, you know, that kind of 8 through 12 range, there is times where you're having to pass on them because then you really need to get those running backs. So a lot of the time these builds would be with 3 quarterbacks later in the draft. So that's another thing to kind of focus into it. But the other part that we talked about is it's, you know, outside of having that second tight end on your roster in those opening 7 rounds, it is basically a 0 RB build, and you're using basically all the same principles as a 0 RB draft. So if people are wondering, you know, this sounds a little bit more complicated or tricky to navigate, the part of that would be that in this situation, it's a 0 RB draft where you're adding in that additional second tight end, because part of the 0 RB principles is trying to get that elite tight end on your roster, and we've always looked to get at least one of them in the past. But the other part is the emergence of a Trey McBride, off Sam Laporta, and now off a Dalton Kincaid. That is opening up the pathway to, I guess, more of those guys at the top end. So not only are they cheaper, there is more of them. And that means, though, that there is the opportunity to get at least one of them on all your rosters, because the talent pool at the top for a long time was pretty much Rob Gronkowski and Travis Kelce. That was the elite tight end that we would talk about in the past. So more opportunities to do it. Blair, any final thoughts on the tight end process before we get on? Blair has surprised me here. He's going straight into a draft. So, Blair, we are on the clock here.
And we are.
You want to go Garrett Wilson? Who do you want to go with?
I like Garrett Wilson.
Okay, let's do it.
Sorry about that. Got us. I was having some issues with my with the stream running in my Chrome, so I had to open it in a different browser. So we'll see. Hopefully this works. I think these are Sean's rankings from RotoViz in the rankings here.
Okay, so to set it up here, that is I have to say I truly enjoyed that. That was quite a surprise to dive straight into a draft while on the clock with 20 seconds to play with here. What draft slot did we get, Blair?
We got the 108.
Okay, so we have a little bit of time between picks to try and decide what we're going to do as we shift around some of our thoughts. Since we did pick kind of the normal crew go off the board, we're 2 picks away. Drake London, Chris Olave are 2 of my favorite preferences here. We are 1 pick away. Drake London went, Chris Olave still available. It kind of falls into the Nico Collins, Malik Neighbors kind of trajectory, which is only a couple of picks down by ADP. I would love to get Olave here on the roster. Nico Collins does go off the board. Is Olave somebody that you're looking to draft?
Definitely. Olave is probably my top pick here. I think you can make a case for one of the San Francisco guys as well, but I like Olave. So let's lock him up here.
I do like, you know, with even Wilson or Olave, while we talked about some of the stuff we want to do throughout this draft, we are then open to their quarterbacks later in the draft, which are much lower opportunity cost at Aaron Rodgers and Derek Carr. So even if you get a value as the draft progresses now at quarterback, you can be like, well, such and such is a way past ADP. Maybe we want to add them to the roster. But when we look at our opportunities now, we can continue to build it out. We can bypass those elite guys, which means then that we can continue to pick up on our elite tight ends as we move through here. So pretty nice to get those 2 picks. If Olave had went, Nico Collins would have probably been my next pick. Is that how you're playing? You mentioned the San Francisco guys. Obviously, reports over the last couple of days with Brandon Ayuk looking for the trade request. It felt like that trade request had happened multiple times this offseason, but would that affect you at the moment drafting him? And I've been kind of drafting Debo over Ayuk, not in terms of ADP, but he's been my target at current cost. Has it changed anything up for you?
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit lower on Ayuk. I actually hadn't noticed in this draft that Samuel was already off the board. He often will fall to kind of the mid-second. So he would be my preference between those San Francisco guys. My suspicion is that Ayuk is going to be a 49er in 2024, but there is always that chance that he ends up somewhere just completely terrible.
Yeah. There's only one team so far that started off running back. That was Christian McCaffrey, Achan, and then DK Metcalf in the spot number 1. Have you started many drafts at all this year with running back start so far?
I don't think I've done it once so far this year, which I'm not opposed to doing it. It just hasn't worked out yet. But I think if you can pair, McCaffrey Achan is one I like. I might have done kind of a McCaffrey Kyren Williams build earlier in the season. Now I can't remember. You kind of get those that correlation with those guys. Yeah.
I did a draft with Tom Strachan recently on DraftKings, and it's PPR format over there, and we did do a kind of a robust running back episode to see how it would turn out, and I believe we had 3 in the first 4 rounds, but that was really trying to push our limits here. We are now 1 pick away again. The queue would be Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp's there. So this is the Sam Laporta range. Sam Laporta does go.
He just goes.
Yeah, so in this case, is there any of those wide receivers you have a priority for? Diggs, Flowers? I like both of those guys.
I think this is a good spot for Diggs. Who we are going to take. 20 seconds is pretty quick.
Yeah. I do think, well, the reason I was saying that is my hope is that we might, at 7 picks away, we might get McBride around the corner.
Right.
We may not. He would have been the other option there. I do feel a little bit sometimes when you lose out on like a Sam Laporta 1 pick before your selection. Sometimes it just tilts me a little bit too much that I don't want to go, and jump into the next tight end straight away.
Yeah,
we'll see how it plays out. We might miss out on him.
I think we should be able to get McBride here or Kincaid, which would
I think we'll certainly be able to get one of them, I believe.
Yeah.
But Sam Laporta there would have been a no-brainer pick for me. I like Diggs, but I have most of them wide receivers quite closely tiered together. Travis Kelce goes off the board. So we'll see now if maybe it's a double elite tight end build here from the team in 12 if they jump back into tight end. So we'll see if we get it back. When we're talking about these guys with Laporta, I'm targeting Laporta, McBride, and Kincaid more so than Travis Kelce. But out of those guys at the very, very top end, have you much of a split between Laporta, McBride, Kincaid, and is Kelce in that group with you, or is he just slightly behind that group?
I think I have them about the way ADP is, but with Kelce a little bit lower. I assume the pick is McBride here.
Yeah, we don't. I noticed the way we weren't going to discuss it.
Not even going to talk. So I like them kind of in the order that they're going, except I probably prefer McBride and maybe even Kincaid over Kelce. Although I don't think you can go wrong with Kelce, even at his age. I think he's can put up a pretty big season.
Yeah, I would agree on that side of it as well. I'm kind of playing that ADP into it to try and get them, at ADP or even slightly below, like we get McBride at that range there. So we have set it up with Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Stephon Diggs, then Trey McBride. One of the things when I've been drafting with Sean recently that I've noticed as we've lost Blair, I'm sure he'll be back in a moment momentarily. I was going to say that we're talking a lot about the bye weeks, and I have tended to come on with some shows recently and talk about the bye weeks and feel like maybe I'm overemphasizing it. I've done some slow drafts recently with Zachary Kruger and Tom Strachan, and we're talking about those bye weeks. And I feel like maybe I'm talking about it too much, but I've noticed Sean in recent drafts has talked about one of the teams we took recently was Garrett Wilson start. And I was talking about taking Chris Olave in that draft. He decided we would take Nico Collins. The reason for that is both of those guys having a week 12 bye. Are you concerned with bye weeks throughout these teams? I know obviously it's beneficial to have them spread out, but I try and balance it throughout the whole draft rather than just at the start.
Yeah, I am certainly a little bit concerned with the bye weeks just because it does limit your stacking options. I mean, not that we were necessarily going to draft Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers on this team, but it does make it difficult in some cases to complete those stacks because you don't want to have the two quarterbacks overlapping. Would have been nice to get Kincaid there to pair with McBride as we're talking about double elite tight end.
We are on the clock though, so we do have things to talk about. You mentioned the Addison selection. Obviously, he is a little bit less of a consideration. We have 11 seconds. Do you want to go with Pitts here? Do you want to go with Worthy? They would be. I'd go with Worthy if you want, but if you want to go with Pitts, that's fine too.
Yeah.
Can we get it done?
We can. We'll go with Worthy here. We'll probably be able to get another.
The reason I said that is we've talked about. Pitts went in the next pick, so maybe my decision making isn't as good. I was going to say because we have got McBride, I'm looking at Kittle and Bowers as well as potential.
Yep.
Just looking through those, the bye weeks obviously are okay. We have separate bye weeks on those two players in case we do go with a 2 tight end build. So we're 6 picks away. I feel not sure, but like we look at 2 of the teams that are picking before it comes back to us, both already have tight ends. I do think that when we're talking about double elite tight end, I do think that that's still not something that's been widely adopted, obviously. And if I do see it happening, I tend to think that it's somebody who's probably listening into some of the shows or reading some of the work on the website. So I think we might get one of those back. I kind of nudged in the Worthy pick. Rashee Rice goes 3 picks later with Rome, Adunze in between. Are you still going with Worthy over Rice? Have you changed any? We've seen Rice kind of creep up a little bit over. I think people are less concerned about, potentially getting a suspension of that, but I still think that it's very much in play, and I'm still drafting Worthy over him.
Yeah, I am too. I'm still going Worthy over Rice, although I do like, Rice's price when he was sometimes going even in the 8th round didn't make a lot of sense for a player with his kind of upside. We're back on the clock by ADP. We're looking at, Kittle is probably the first guy I like by ADP.
I think the 2 players I like here are Kittle and JSN, and I think we might get JSN back to us. So happy to go Kittle?
All right, let's go Kittle here. And we got our double elite tight end build, and we'll hopefully get JSN on the way back.
Yeah, and there is some other options. Jameson Williams probably be there if he's not. But we do start to then get into, Jalen Warren and those kind of names as well that we can look at. But we did talk about, getting basically, we didn't say getting 7 receivers, I guess we'll say, but through those opening 6 rounds, we have 4 wide receivers, then the 2 tight ends. Want to have 5 wide receivers through the opening 7 rounds. So we'll be targeting a wide receiver, hopefully, here as it comes back to us to get that in play. I feel pretty good about this team so far with the overall start, with the basically the assembled crew that we have here. Is there anything that what those picks we've done so far in hindsight already that maybe you would change some things about, or are you happy with how it's all going?
No, I'm happy with the way this team is coming together. I think the next few picks, we want to get some wide receivers if we can, if the guys we like make it to us. Even with having what appears to be a pretty strong starting 4, you still can never get too complacent at the wide receiver position. So,
and the thing with having a starting 4 at tight end at this point, and then you obviously have the other 2 picks, starting 4 wide receiver and 2 tight ends. You quickly get into the 0 RB range here. So if you do not have the wide receivers here, you could suddenly be in round 12 where it's 4 wide receivers, and then you have your 4 running backs, and you haven't filled out, and you've actually started to kind of wear away at the position a little bit. So we're 3 picks away. Pretty hopeful here that we get JSN or Jameson Williams. Is there any other wide receivers in this range that you like? JSN went off the board. I shouldn't have said that.
JSN, yeah. In terms of wide receiver, Jameson Williams is kind of the end of a tier, but he's a little bit lower down in terms of ADP. Well, maybe not. I think Jameson is a guy I would consider here. We can also go with one of these running backs. We can also make it a 3 tight end build.
We could. What's the research showing on 3 tight end? I think we probably need to go with Jameson here. What do you think?
Yeah, I like Jameson.
Yeah. We did have Keon Coleman go off the board 1 pick before. I seen that yellow line flash up on the board, and I thought, Jameson's gone, but he makes it back to us as our wide receiver 5. We do have Evan Ingram, Jake Ferguson go off the board. Sometimes I'm really pleased, obviously, with how things have gone, that we got Trey McBride back after we picked Stephon Diggs, and you get the George Kittle pick, which, probably if we don't take Kittle there, the player that I go for is either JSN or Deontay Johnson. But sometimes then when you get a Bowers back to you in the 7th round there, for example, he may even come back to us here in the 8th. It does become a situation where maybe if you did add Deontay Johnson or JSN there, then you add Jameson Williams. But realistically, I think if we added a wide receiver in the George Kittle pick, I think then that Jameson Williams pick becomes Brock Bowers. I don't think we probably push him around the corner. What do you think? How would we play? Is that the way we would have played it? Basically, we were going to get a wide receiver and a tight end, whether you flip the build or not. The difficult part now is when we get back and the tier break has happened at wide receiver with Jameson Williams. Like, Brock Bowers is the best non-receiver available here. How do you want to play it? Do you want to go into like Jalen Warren as the pick here? What do you want to do?
Yeah, I think here I'm okay doing Jalen Warren or Brooks.
Let's do Brooks, because I made Sean draft Warren over Brooks in that last draft, so I need to get some Brooks exposure. I've been leaning heavily towards Warren at this range in most drafts, so I don't want to be leaning too much in the wrong direction. I'm guessing that they're in a pretty similar tier, but is Brooks somebody that you have just ahead of Warren there for you?
Yeah, I have Brooks a little bit ahead of Warren. I think they're pretty close, though. I like both of them this year, and I'm happy to get Warren if on some teams. Yeah, if Brooks is off the board. And it kind of depends on what your team looks like up to that point. Warren goes just 2 picks later.
I do think
Goff at pick 90 is pretty aggressive, right?
Yeah, I do think whoever comes, well, it's the Sam Laporta drafter, maybe, and it's Amon-Ra.
Yeah.
And the one thing I would highlight, me and Sean did draft a team with Sam Laporta and Jameson Williams in that previous draft, and when we were waiting, we kind of were waiting for Goff to come true, and a non-Lions team did draft Jared Goff as their second option. But I would say I would be trying to push the quarterback through, especially when you have 2 of the guys. I would be hoping that it is a case that comes back around to you, rather than taking that push. For example, let's say you were worried about us or the Jahmyr Gibbs drafter. After that pick, neither of us would have selected until after that person's pick again. So I think you can get them back through in the next round. And then you can also add, let's say, Jalen Warren to that roster. I think then you're in a much better spot. So it can really hurt. Like, it hurt me when we didn't get Goff back in that draft. But, over the course of draft season, you'll build out, better supercharged kind of lineups by doing that. So Jared Goff usually goes in the 11th round of these drafts. So a couple of picks ahead there of where he would normally go. We're 1 pick away, Blair. Chase Brown, Tajay Spears. I would say Tajay Spears by the ADP selection. I know by ranking it's the opposite way, but anyone else in the pitch here for you?
On this team, I think Spears fits well. We kind of want to keep our eye on Brock Purdy, but I think he'll come back around.
Yeah, I think Purdy comes back around. And I think as we mentioned, now we don't want to have a crossover on the bye weeks for the quarterbacks, but we should probably get one of Rodgers or Carr on this roster, and then we can see how we fill it out. Do you want to try and get Purdy and one of those guys? Is that what you're thinking? Try and get 2 stacks going here?
Yeah, that would be a pretty good idea to try and stack up Kittle if we can with one of Rodgers and
Purdy's usually in the 10th round here, so right around where a couple of picks ahead actually of where we'll be picking here, but we do have.
Yeah, I think his ADP is 112 and we're at 113, so it'll be close.
But we have a QB so far for 12. We have no QB in the team that is drafting in spot 11, so maybe they're the one that we need to fear. But we have 2 quarterbacks in team 10. We have 1 quarterback then, and Anthony Richardson team in team 9.
The one I would have worried about was team 12 because they have Debo.
Yeah, there was a little breath there I was taking in. But both of those pass, so we'll see. Sometimes when you get too confident now like this, Blair, this was kind of how I felt. We were looking at, will the Amon-Ra team pass on Goff? He did pass, and then somebody else took him. So we're back up. We do have that option. I think when we look at the options here, I mentioned Chase Brown, but I feel like there'll be enough running back. I think the advantage here of having Purdy, even if it is just at ADP, is the smart call here. Because I think you can do a Purdy team with either Carr. I know we're going to look to probably go to 3 quarterbacks, but you do have some flexibility if it's Purdy and Carr or Purdy and Rodgers to be able to build that out with a 2 quarterback build.
Right. So, we get Purdy there. I do think it would have been difficult to get him back in the next round just because the Ayuk drafter has 2 picks between our next round.
I thought it was kind of there. We pass up. The Ayuk drafter as well has no QB, so that was potential bit in there. There is some interesting teams being built out here, though, that I might be interesting to look at the end. That team that does have Brandon Ayuk starts out with 5 wide receivers: Jefferson, Ayuk, Moore, Higgins, Keenan Allen, JSN goes after that, but they have Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, Raheem Mostert, Trey Benson. So all running backs, all wide receivers so far. Interesting on that. I'm just looking here. Yeah, they were also probably they passed on Caleb Williams in that selection where they went with Raheem Mostert. Mostert there's a pick I love making, but maybe that would have made the sense with the 2 Bears in that lineup as well. We are moving back around. I would say we're very balanced. We have 2 running backs and we have 1 quarterback, 2 tight ends, 5 wide receivers. But basically at this point, we're kind of around, if not at where we want to be. And then when we look at where the likes of an Aaron Rodgers goes off the board, that's the 14th round. Look at Derek Carr's in the 17th round. So I think these next couple of rounds, I was hoping maybe Javonte would have come back. He goes at the 10-11 turn. But I am looking here to probably, unless we get an option at the wide receiver position we really like. I don't believe Jerry Jeudy has gone off the board yet. He could be interesting, but then we're looking at some running backs to fill things out. How are you looking to play it here 3 picks away from our next selection?
Right. I would be looking to get some interesting wide receivers if we can. We have 5, but it's always nice to keep filling that out because the options in this range of the draft are pretty thin for the most part. So anytime you can get some high upside receivers around here, it's always good. There are a lot of running back picks I like. And there goes Jeudy. So that's unfortunate. We are on the clock. See, really wide receiver has been almost wiped out. We're talking about,
I think it's a running back pick here.
Yeah.
Unless we could go Mike Williams. We could go Mike Williams and go for Rodgers. Do you want to try that? Okay, let's try it.
Yeah, let's try it.
It does give us 3 wide receivers. We'll do it, but it's going to give us 3 wide receivers on week 12. So we're out of week 12 buys at this point. But so that's just something to keep an eye on. But maybe going with the Jets is I've only drafted Mike Williams a couple of times. But the Jets then face off against the Bills. It's hard to add in that bring back at this point of the draft. We might see something coming ahead to that. But the Jets, and Williams did get injured pretty early in the season. I still think that he's probably not going to be 100%, but we'll add him in for some fun there. We probably need to be heading in now for the next 2 rounds, probably at the running back position, and then moving back probably to a Rodgers pick at that particular point. Cole Kmet goes off the board. These running backs, there's a lot of interesting names. There's Charbonnet, Miller, Lloyd, Vidal. There's lots of names here.
Either Miller or Lloyd would work. Miller is another week 12 buy, but he's also, if we want to get Carr,
I think we should go Lloyd just for the purposes of maybe getting outmatched in week 12. Because we would be leaning in then to, if we do take either Carr or Rodgers, that would have set us up. But ideally, I think we go with Rodgers now over Carr. In a vacuum there, I would rather Miller over Lloyd, but it is very close. But we would then have leaned into having a lot into week 12, so we would have been basically passing that week up.
Right.
So
Lloyd was also the ADP value, so I think that's a smart pick there.
I mentioned it when you got cut off earlier about the bye weeks, but I think taking Mike Williams, one thing I would be kind of trying to do is not do 2 double stacks with your quarterback and have 6 players off on the same week. It might be a bit too much. So yeah, we'll see if he comes back. Maybe it comes into conversation. I expect him to go. But Marshawn Lloyd paired with Brooks and Spears, 2 rookies on the roster here. Miller does go off the board to the team out of the 3rd spot. But yeah, the running back room, as we've set things up so far, are you now looking at that the one thing I'm looking at are wide receivers with 3 week 12 buys on it. We may want to get an additional wide receiver. We are at the moment, and I think in a pretty strong position at wide receiver. We have 6, but we probably want to get. Do you want to get to 7 with this roster?
I might. Yeah, it's kind of hard to say. I think we can definitely go that route. Go for 7. I do like how our running back room looks. I think Spears. Most people are kind of expecting Tony Pollard to be the running back 1 there, but I'm not sure that's so clear. So I think he actually gives us a lot of even early season firepower. So I do think the way our running back room is shaping up looks pretty strong. Same with Lloyd. Lloyd could be a factor immediately. So all of these guys are pretty strong. So I'd probably be looking for a 7th wide receiver.
I do think that would be the one concern is the early season production, but that's always going to be the case with a 0 RB roster unless it is like a Jalen Warren or Aaron Jones, Ramondre Stevenson. You're looking at maybe even a James Conner. Once you go past those guys, and if you don't get Mostert, you are looking at a lot of guys. Well, Singletary might try to win. We are on the clock. Hit me with your favorite running back to draft here. I would say it's between the ADP is between McLaughlin, Spears, and Algier. Do you want to go with?
Okay.
I meant to say Wright, not Spears. I'm good with Wright if that's the direction you want to go here.
Well, we're going to go with Wright. He was at the top of the queue. He gives us some week 16 correlation with the San Francisco stack, so that's kind of nice. I think, he's another guy who you kind of worry about the early season production, but obviously with his speed and athleticism in that offense, he can put up a ton of points if he gets some opportunity.
This might be the all-star concerned about early season production running back room that we're putting together here. I did a show this week with Sean talking about the 0 RB list and some of the preparation for that and looking through, and we talked about Lloyd, Kendry Miller, Wright, and some other names, and we did talk about it might be a couple of weeks into the season, so we'll see how it plays out over the next couple of picks. But I think in terms of upside, these are massive upside plays where you may end up having some weeks where there's no action, but I think Lloyd and Wright are massive upside plays, and Brooks obviously could be the featured back in that offense, which we're hoping, even though if we're not optimistic that it may turn around. We're starting to get into that Aaron Rodgers range here. We could try and push him back around because we have both guys. How are you feeling here? We're 1 pick away.
Just
how's the Breece Hall drafter doing? That's the one I'd probably look at.
Yeah. Let me just get him in the queue in case. Breece Hall has 2. He's already got 2 quarterbacks.
We're going to run out of time anyway. I think I would probably, let's push it. Let's be aggressive.
All right.
I was going to say I'd probably just take him because there's a tier running back here with Davis. We end up taking Jaleel McLaughlin there, but there was a tier of running back with Davis, McLaughlin, Algier, and Bucky Irving. So I was kind of thinking one of those guys get back to us. So we'll see if Rodgers gets back. This is kind of practicing what we preach. I did talk about that Jared Goff pick earlier. We are trying to push Aaron Rodgers around past ADP, which when you're going this late at quarterback and you have two of the wide receivers, probably not the necessary thing to do, but we do have Derek Carr then as that backup plan if we go in that direction. I tend to try and, as much as possible, push the QB picks beyond ADP to try and add in that, I think the upside, and especially when we have that backup option, and even we can always do our backdoor Denver Broncos stacks with Bo Nix if we have to get into that direction. But I would much rather be pushing quarterbacks like we did with Brock Purdy, where you're pushing it on the short term. So when we take, Tyjae Spears, you're only waiting 8 more picks to get back, whereas this time around we're waiting 14 picks, which is a little bit more pressing. Right. And you do see things like we do have the team in one who I talked about earlier, but they have now gone Trevor Lawrence, Javonte Williams in between Geno Smith, then Noah Fant, then Will Levis, then Chig Okonkwo. So they've kind of stacked up their tight end quarterback duos there, but they have 3 quarterbacks through 14, right? You just don't know. Those are the sort of things that you could see somebody just say, like, well, let's take a third quarterback that's Aaron Rodgers unstacked. That can happen, but you are trying to play the game here to push him through.
Right. Yeah, it is tricky. I think, you would maybe be worried about the Breece Hall drafter, but so far he's got 2 running backs, as far as I can tell, unstacked. So I think he's probably not going to be looking for Rodgers, both because he has 2 quarterbacks already and because he's not necessarily building those stacks.
Yeah, and is that this team here?
Troy Franklin go off the board, which would have been a nice way to do the backdoor Bo Nix stack you were talking about in case we miss, but I think we have a few options.
Yeah, we're 1 pick away. We do get Rodgers back through. I think it's probably smart to get him on the roster here after.
Yeah, I think there's nobody here. Yeah, unless you want to try and push him for Wandale or something, or Braylon Allen.
I think we'll see if one of them might sneak through.
Yeah, I agree.
Even Wandale, there is Marvin Mims and Walker. Oh, he didn't sneak very far after that.
Yeah, too bad.
But there is, Mims, Walker that are there as well. Who knows? Maybe I haven't drafted Malachi Corley at all, but we want more week 12 buys. But I think now with Purdy and Rodgers and it means that we might still go for that third quarterback, but it's going to give us the option of going with 2 quarterbacks if we want, which can allow you that extra wide receiver, tight end, or running back pick as we go through. We do see Bucky Irving and Khalil Herbert go off the board as 2 picks there. Our running back room is now up to Jonathan Brooks, Tyjae Spears, Marshawn Lloyd, Jalen Wright, Jaleel McLaughlin. Marvin Mims also gone off the board. So we're losing some of our key targets there in those last 4 picks. But I do like where we're starting to get at with the running back position. Would have liked to add Herbert or Irving. And out of the running backs for the Bears, the kind of backup guys, I have been drafting Roschon Johnson over Herbert. Have you a preference for those 2 guys at the back? Are you interested in Johnson if he comes back?
I do like Johnson if he comes back. I've been kind of drafting both of them kind of interchangeably. I think Johnson could make sense. There goes Corley. That's kind of unfortunate. The other player,
I think when we've made our bet on the other 2 receivers, I probably would pass on them in this situation.
We could go Johnson. Braylon Allen also could be interesting on a Jets stack. I don't know if that necessarily fits. He's maybe.
I would rather go Johnson. I think here.
You'd rather go Johnson. I'm happy with Johnson.
Yeah, we are a bit ahead of ADP, but I like the other player would be Walker, but we're ahead of ADP on that as well. But I think adding Johnson in to this running back room, and then we have 6 running backs at this point. We have separate bye weeks on all those running backs, and although we have some concerns about early season production, I think adding McLaughlin and Johnson, I think they're obviously the 2 last guys we've drafted, but I'm probably most confident outside of Spears and Brooks, them 2 having I think Lloyd and Wright could be later season plays with huge upside. So I think adding both of those guys. Allen, I think, would have been a very fine play if we hadn't have got as much week 12. So I think, talking back to Sean's point at the start, it would allow you, if you had went, let's say, with a Nico Collins, you probably would have skipped on Diggs then though, but that would have allowed you to go in that direction to have stacked up a little bit more on the Jet side at week 12.
Right. Looks like we lost Daniel Jones there. So
yeah, he actually went before our last pick.
Yeah, okay. So even if we wanted to go someone like Jalen Hyatt, we couldn't have. Oh, and there goes Derek Carr too. So we're losing
So
our
our
stacks.
question then becomes: are we comfortable going here? We have 2 picks left. Are we comfortable going 2 quarterbacks here and using the other spots? I'm kind of confident in the. Obviously, you get the element of if you're in the playoffs, you get the third shot at the quarterback upside.
Right.
The players there that I'm usually drafting at this point are Carr, Jones, or Nix. Nix hasn't gone, so he'd be an option. But do you want to get that third quarterback, or do you want to think about a third tight end, or do you just want to fill it out here with the wide receivers and so on at the end here?
Right. I think I'd be looking at the wide receivers, and if it
I'm
makes
hoping that Walker
sense,
might come back to us.
yeah, that would be nice. If it makes sense, we can add a third quarterback, although it's maybe going to be a little bit difficult to get somebody. I think you can also look at Jalen Tolbert.
Yeah.
McMillan is pretty interesting to me. Any of these 3 guys I'm happy with.
Yeah.
What do you
We
think?
are on the clock. We have the option of all 3. You're at the controls.
All right,
I
who's
think
your
by ADP,
eliminate one?
I'll eliminate McMillan.
Okay.
Funny
We'll
enough,
go Walker
McMillan's
then.
actually had a huge ADP
Yeah, he
advantage
is.
there. Yeah.
He is. Baker Mayfield's already off the board, so that closes off the stack option. Although obviously that's not, that doesn't even come into play with Walker or Tolbert. In terms of
We do get
quarterbacks,
I was about to say it works out either way there, because I was going to say we should have took McMillan for a bring back on the Panthers, but we also have the Texans and the Ravens, so that works out either way.
yeah. I mean, yeah, you can still go Knicks, and McMillan gives you a little bit of that correlation, but that's maybe kind of thin. But if we wanted that third quarterback, I think maybe Knicks also does enough anyway, and that offense is spread out enough that you don't necessarily need one of his receivers.
We're 2-6-7-2.
Yeah.
So what do you feel? We have 1 pick left. What do you feel most comfortable with structurally here?
I would probably go Tolbert or Knicks.
Okay.
So what do you think? Oh, there goes Knicks.
There goes Nick. So Tolbert, the other players here, Tolbert, Shipley, or Garendo, and you make the pick.
Shipley has a week 5 bye, and so does Spears. So let's do Tolbert. Or Garendo could be interesting. Oh man, I forgot about him. Let's go Tolbert. Sorry. 2 seconds left. We're going Tolbert. Yeah, Garendo maybe could have fit with the Purdy Kittle team. That could have been interesting as well. But I like the 6-8 build we ended up getting.
You would have been right. We would have had all running backs at separate buys if we went Garendo at the week 9 buy. But I also am interested in the one other running back at week 5 pushing us off. That pick is Shipley somebody you're looking to draft? Was the bye week cover up there?
I like Shipley a lot. Yeah, when you have 6, when we're talking about getting a 7th running back, so that bye week is basically meaningless. So that shouldn't have been a reason to push us off of him. It just was kind of a, with only a few seconds left, kind of a gut reaction. But Shipley would have been a good pick there. I should have.
He's
likely to go dismiss that so quick.
He's likely to go undrafted here. That is the part though. With we like to filibuster when we're setting up these picks, and we also have limited time with the 20-second clock on this edition. But that was the pick when we had Walker, McMillan, or Tolbert. I was all of them are fine. In general, I'm going with Tolbert there. And then for Tolbert to come back through, I think it's fine to add him in. I did mention earlier in the draft you want to make sure to keep adding to that wide receiver firepower, and we had Worthy, obviously, then we added Williams, but we added that's Jameson Williams, but the only pick then up to them last 2 rounds was Mike Williams. So you want to make sure that you're continuing to add to that. I was kind of easy there. If Bo Nix hadn't went, maybe that's the way we would have went. And myself and Sean, I don't know if you're buying in this drum, still adding in some Justin Fields in the 20th round to those 3 quarterback rosters. He could have been a potential option there. We did that with our most recent draft, slotted him in there as the 3rd quarterback. So I think it all plays out well. There's a number of ways you could have done that, and it's a little bit. That's why I like some of the FFPC drafts so much. You get the extra 2 rounds, and then you're able to add some of those deeper names. And it feels like when you get to the end of some of the underdog drafts, you're thinking, I wish that guy could get drafted. I wish I could draft him. And then they go undrafted and you're thinking, it'd be nice to add them in. So we finish up, I think, with a pretty strong roster overall. Blair, do you want to give us a rundown of the full team?
Yes, definitely. At wide receiver, we end with Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Stephon Diggs, Xavier Worthy, Jameson Williams, Mike Williams, Devontae Walker, and Jalen Tolbert. We paired many of our receivers with Aaron Rodgers. We also got Brock Purdy at quarterback to pair with our tight end George Kittle, who plays opposite Trey McBride in at least 2 games this season. So that's nice. And then at running back, Jonathan Brooks, Tajay Spears, Marshawn Lloyd, Jalen Wright, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Roschon Johnson. Definitely a team, 20 seconds to make these picks when you're trying to discuss them on the clock is a lot of pressure. But I think even if you don't take that into account, I think this is a pretty good looking team. And we came out with a good structure, a 2-6-8-2 build with the 0 RB double elite tight end. We didn't get the third quarterback, which would have been kind of on this show that we're teasing for Friday, something we touch on a little bit.
So that's really, I would say that's the one thing we didn't do that we talked about. It does spike those win rates to have that third quarterback. Right. I think though as well, we talked about kind of late quarterback, and I think when we get Brock Purdy in the 10th, and then we get Rodgers, like his ADP is in the 14th, which is kind of, you could say, depending on what you want to stretch the quarterback window out, potentially at the back end of that. But, we're close to 2 QBs in the window, even with those 2, which I think allows you to go to quarterback. Even if you have a Stafford, for example, I think that works too. But, then when you drop down to Drake May, even Bryce Young, Sam Darnold, Russell Wilson, JJ McCarthy, Baker Mayfield, there's a lot of quarterbacks going there where, and I'm going to say this and people are probably going to be like, well, their jobs are all secure this season. There's Will Levis in that range. There is more question marks, whether it's starting the season or finishing the season, that you kind of nearly want that insurance of the third quarterback. I'm saying that Aaron Rodgers played 1 snap last season. They missed the entire season. But in general, I think those 2 guys are going to play the entire season. So I think you might get away with it at that point. So I really enjoyed this. And you mentioned the 20-second clock. I think, as I teased at the start, we're quite comfortable with the drafting process for a team like this. I think if you weren't, it would be much more challenging to work through those picks. But for sure. Fun team. Really enjoyed building it out. And as Blair mentioned there, we do have a show coming out on RotoViz Overtime this week where I talked to Blair about his recent article that is linked in today's show notes up on rotoviz.com about double elite tight end. We kind of talked through all the reasons for why we've tried to play it out through this way. But if we get those early season running back points, I think this team is really in good shape, because even though we haven't overstacked it or overcorrelated it, there is the Lions 49ers aspect to it. We also have Texans, Ravens. There's a couple of games there sprinkled in throughout that is going to give us, even, we get Olave and I was looking up. I'm so used to drafting Brock Bowers. I was about to say we have Olave and Brock Bowers. We don't have Brock Bowers, so you can heavily ignore that thought process. But we are set up, I think, pretty nicely. Just maybe not as correlated as we would like, but you sometimes have to balance it in a different way. So we are set up pretty nicely, I think, and we are in a good spot. But how are you feeling overall about this team? I'm pretty comfortable with it.
Yeah, I'm very happy with this team. We're not that correlated, like you said. It might have been an interesting team to. I mean, it would have been great if Dalton Kincaid had gotten back to us, because then you get that Week 17 game against Garrett Wilson. I don't think it would have been the right call to take Kincaid instead of McBride in the 4th round. I think that would have been too early for Kincaid. So I don't think that was a mistake.
I think, again, like I was saying, a big thing that I've talked about this draft season is when you're picking players at certain ADPs, like you'll see sometimes from time to time, let's say a Jamar Gibbs get drafted in the top 5 picks, and I have no problem with that. But the part that is tricky is other teams have better players than paired at the back of round 2 with Gibbs than you're going to probably have with your team. So when you're drafting, if you're like reaching up to take Kincaid at that point to correlate it with Garrett Wilson. There's going to be a team then that has done that with Garrett Wilson in the first round, and then they're still getting Kincaid in the fifth round.
In the fifth,
they might even have took Josh Allen in the fourth if you look Josh Allen with one pick after ours. So it's to say, trying to, if you're doing a lot of these drafts, if you're doing one draft, go and get who you want to get. But if you're drafting a lot of drafts, like I mentioned missing out on Goff and that stack previously, today we could have very easily missed out on that Aaron Rodgers stack, but then because you couldn't have had Jaleel McLaughlin and Aaron Rodgers if you do it the other way around. And it's trying to build out those teams where you're also not just doing something that the rest of the field have at a better kind of combination of 20 picks or 18 picks in this case.
Right. Yeah, right. That's a good point. I think the only, it's always a little bit disappointing when you don't get, for instance, JSN getting back to you at pick 80, and we have to go with Jameson Williams there, who's doesn't have many correlations on our team.
He does work out with the 49ers, so it did work out from that perspective.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, good point. So yeah, I mean, a little bit ahead of ADP on Williams there, but it's crazy. Just like
I feel like this was very much this was a best player available draft. I think this is like if it's an NFL roster, you're taking the best player on the board. I think we got the best player on the board a lot of times, and sometimes then you do give up that little bit of correlation. When you get your player targets like that.
That's right. Yeah. No, I think that's right. I mean, it's crazy. You see it in this draft. I think especially just how quickly wide receiver falls off, because like Jameson Williams is the last guy you even feel kind of good about. And even some of the guys going ahead of him, you're like Keon Coleman, Hopkins,
Yeah.
It's so hard to get these wide receiver picks later in the drafts, and it's so important to get your wide receiver firepower early, which is one of the drawbacks of double elite tight end, is that you need those.
It does show though, again, there's a lot of running back options late. We even kind of talked about some of the ones like a Shipley that we passed. We took that Aaron Rodgers pick we passed on Bucky Irving, Khalil Herbert at that point. When we look through some of the wide receivers, as you mentioned there, we mentioned Jerry Jeudy, and he went off the board 2 picks before our pick, and that was what made us go with the Mike Williams pick. But if you look at the names going around, it's just full of question marks, and there's some players in that range that I like, but it's all like they're basically kind of more than 0 RB profiles at wide receiver, if that makes sense. Like I do like Dontavian Wicks, who goes a couple of rounds or 1 round ahead of that, but you're kind of looking at there's a couple of names in every round, and even some of those rounds there's no names at wide receiver that I would want to have on the roster. So again, that fits perfectly with that 0 RB build as well, because that's where you're trying to hit those running back names. But overall, very happy with the draft, and a fun draft. Hopefully people have enjoyed listening in. Let us know your thoughts, and we will be doing some more of these over the course of the rest of the off season. We'll try and do them weekly, but it can't always be weekly. We have other commitments and stuff coming up. As I mentioned, I have a wedding on the horizon. Hopefully I'll have a speech written before that. But thank you for everyone who's tuned in. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. This is the RotoViz Best Ball Show, a live stream here on the RotoViz YouTube channel. Hit that thumbs up, and until we are back, have a good one.